What if you were able to sit down for lunch with some of the greatest leaders in the world? What would you ask? What would they say? Welcome to the Linch with a Leader podcast, where you're invited to join us in learning the spiritual principles behind big success. Here's your host, Mike Lynch.
You know, every leader faces daunting tasks, but the great leaders know how to make the daunting things doable. And that's what we're going to talk about in episode 236 of the Linch with a Leader podcast. If I've never met you before, my name is Mike, and it is an honor to be on this leadership journey with you, as we're all seeking to be the leaders that we were created to be in the spaces and places that God has put us. Well, today we get to sit down with a repeat guest, and she's a repeat guest because I always get something out of the conversation. I'm always challenged when I leave the call, and she's somebody I hear so much talk about after the episode has come out. And today I get to sit down in episode 236 with Elizabeth Dixon. Elizabeth, the very first time she came on, we talked about customer service because she was leading customer service for this little struggling restaurant chain called Chick-fil-A. And we found out, man, Elizabeth didn't just end up at Chick-fil-A. She started there doing corporate fitness. Isn't that amazing? And then Elizabeth began to work her way up, ended up running customer service. The last time she was on, we talked about her new book on purpose. And this time, we talk about how to make the daunting doable. Elizabeth left her role at Chick-fil-A, went with Dan and Kathy to Trillith, which is a community that they're building in South Atlanta. And she helps run as the CEO of the Trillith Foundation and just is all things making the Trillith experience happen. And it's movie studios and a community, and it's an amazing thing. And it is, I'll tell you this, I was just down there. It's daunting, but she figures out a way to make it doable. We talk about her rubbing shoulders with Horst Schulze and Jeff Henderson and Dan Cathy and the other great leaders, Mark Miller, that she's been exposed to and what she learned from them. This episode is power packed. So I don't know where you're listening from today, but I'm going to tell you something. There is some good stuff in here for you. So I want you to grab something to write with, grab something to write on, and I want you to pull up a chair, and I want you to listen in to my conversation with Elizabeth Dixon. Well, Elizabeth, you're so fun. I love every time you jump on a call. Thanks for joining me again this morning.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
It's so fun. It was so great to finally meet you this past fall, too. I got to run into you on the streets at Trillith. I was like, I saw a rock star. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Elizabeth. This is amazing.
That's how I felt about you.
Oh, yeah. You just heard my voice. That's all it was, because I'm loud. That's the problem. That's the problem with my life. You're in a super sweet season right now. As a mom, as a leader, you have been on a journey. Different about Elizabeth today than the Elizabeth that started her marriage and working career years ago.
Well, my dad always said that life begins at 40. And I think he's right. So for all the 30 and 20-year-olds that are cringing about turning 40, there's something really special about getting older. I think perspective is driven by experience, where you just have more to build on, more to go back to. And I think that I'm excited about the next 20 and 40 years of life, because that's all just going to compound and increase more and more. Excuse me, the pollen is real right now. So what's different about Elizabeth? I think that my relationship with the Lord is stronger because I have more experiences on what it means to be rooted in Him and to bring things and lay them down to Him. And I think there's better questions that I get to ask, and I get to lead my team better because it's not about me giving answers to them or what I think, but it's about drawing out in them their God-given talents and their wisdom and their discernment. And I think that that's built on failures and doing it average or occasionally doing it well and getting to apply all of that. So I think what's different about Elizabeth is just more perspective, more experience, more failures to be able to move forward Truly, I get excited. Sometimes I think about the 80-year-old version of me, and I'm like, oh, she's going to be cool. Like, she's going to have so many stories, and she's going to be like, oh, honey, I screwed up way bigger than that. Like, don't even worry about that. So I'd say that's what's different about Elizabeth.
Well, I love that because I will tell you, because I'm older than you, every year gets better. Every decade gets better. And, we're in the decade of the season now of grown kids and we're grandparents now. No, we don't claim grand. My wife's known as honey. I'm known as coach. We don't claim because we're staying young mentally, but it does keep getting better. As you've gotten older, how have you learned to figure out what really matters? How have you learned to sift life, to get out the gold and to let go of the stuff that doesn't matter?
Yeah. I mean, I think my 20-year-old self felt like everything mattered. Everything was really important. Part of that's my wiring. Those that have high levels of responsibility feel like, everything is important and everything matters. And I think truly taking a longer term perspective, like 20 years from now, will I remember this? 5 years from now, will I remember this? 5 days from now, will this even be a thing for me? And when I extend the timeline on it and look at my future perspective, it helps me. So when it comes to being wife and mom, 5 days from now, 5 years, 20 years from now, will I look back and be thankful that I prioritized playing foursquare in the driveway?
That's good.
That 5 days from now, will I be glad that I prioritized sending one more email at 5:15 p.m.? Nah. And holding those things in, some people say balance. I don't know that everything is like a weighted, perfect balance, but it's just holding them to go. Truett used to say, win. How do you win? What's important now? And I think to know what's important now, we have to know what's important later.
That's right.
And then bring that into our now.
It's so funny. We were talking before we got on about a guy named Sam Chan. Sam says, you get in life where you're going by your 20s and 30s saying yes. But he said in your 40s, you get where you're going by learning to say no. And we learn, isn't that great? And we learn those things to say no to because we go, that doesn't benefit me long term.
Yeah.
That's not going to help my older self be
right.
that. Yeah.
Right. But in the younger ages, you're right. We have to say yes because otherwise we don't try things. And I was having a conversation with my daughter. She's almost 10. And we were talking about different sport activities she could try. And my encouragement to her was try a bunch of them now. Because at this age, you get to do volleyball for 2 months and decide if you love it, hate it, or are indifferent to it. But if you lock in on one sport really early, you won't really know. So I completely agree with you. We have to say yes to a bunch of things to be able to eliminate. That's not using my gifts. That's not a good use of my time. That doesn't bring me life and energy. Then get to that point in which you go, okay, now I know what I'm stewarding and I need to etch away the things that aren't serving that purpose.
So good. That is and that's such a great, to know that now, you're going to have so many less regrets later. I'm really proud of you for being able to do that because it's the crazy thing. The more you've been gifted with talent-wise, the more that comes your way and you can chase and you can lose years chasing something you really never wanted. And so that's, and because of the way you're wired, you've been exposed to some pretty amazing people, not from just platforms, but literally face-to-face, shoulder to shoulder. You have learned and lived around some of the greatest leaders of our lifetime that we know of. I'm going to throw out a couple names to you.
Okay.
And I would love for you to tell me, play a little game here. I'd love for you to go, this was probably my biggest takeaway from my time around this person. So first one, Horst Schulze. What was your biggest takeaway from Horst?
My goodness, he is the father of hospitality. So Horst Schulze co-founded the Ritz-Carlton, and he was a dedicated mentor of mine for a year and has become a friend since. He and Sherry are a complete power couple and amazing, amazing people. My greatest takeaway from him, gosh, I could give you about 12, but I'm going to pick this one. He taught me that if you communicate to what's the way that I would say this the best? Communicate simply. Don't try to be fancy. If you communicate to the simplest mind in the room, everyone will understand you. He has a brilliant way of being succinct and very simple, but not simplistic. In his book, Excellence Wins, he breaks out what hospitality and excellence looks like that made the Ritz-Carlton redefine hospitality in the hotel industry. And so his ability to just say, be simple. I think sometimes as leaders, it's like we think we need to get fancy and be complicated and use big words, but we lose people when we're using acronyms and fancy language. We lose people and then they don't know what we're saying. And he was continually coming back to be simple, be clear, and communicate in a way that you're bringing everybody along.
What a gentleman, too. What a gentleman.
Yes.
When I had him on the call that day, I think he was in Germany, and he was just such a gentleman.
Yes.
Such a gentleman, just brings it. Second one is one of my favorite people in the world. One of the people that every time they show up, they're just a bright light, and that's Jeff Henderson.
Okay.
What do you love about Jeff Henderson? What have you learned from him that you say, I've deposited this into my life?
Well, I mean, he is the title of his book. Like, he is for people.
Yes.
He is for others. And he's one that lifts, like you said, he's a bright light. He lifts others up. And so I think the big takeaway from him truly is in his book, and it's, what are you for? So many times we think about what we're against, but that's like a zero-sum game. What are you for? What are you going to go after? What are you going to elevate people up to? What are you going to have a hard conversation with someone about, but be on the same side of what you're for? That sure helps tensions be reduced when you can get on the same side of the table and go after something that you're both for. So definitely from Jeff, it's just being clear on what you're for and thinking about that more of the time.
You know, another person that you got to rub shoulders with for years and years at Chick-fil-A while you were in the customer service world was Mark Miller, who was in the leadership space of Chick-fil-A. Every time I talk to Mark, I feel I don't really know anything about leadership. Every time I talk to Mark, I'm like, I think I'm like a first year student of leadership because he is so down the road with his thoughts. You're like, God, that's brilliant. What was your biggest takeaway from knowing Mark?
Man, pouring yourself out generously. You know, I asked him when I was 21 years old, new at Chick-fil-A. I was, since I was 6, I was fascinated with communication and the art of communication. And when I was 21, I asked Mark, I said, will you get lunch with me? Chick-fil-A is an organization that there's a lot of openness. You don't have to go through the boss to get to, no, you can just say, hey, can I have lunch with you? So I asked him, of course I was nervous, you know, is he going to say yes or no? And am I going to have him, you know, smart, important questions? And he was so gracious. We got lunch. And at the end of lunch, he said, what time are we doing this next month?
Wow.
And he did that for 10 years. And he knew my interest in communication. And so as a communicator, there's a point that comes when you cannot say yes to every opportunity that comes your way. And you have a choice of what you do with that. You can say no, or you could say or. And you say, I can't, but hey, here's another option. And Mark would start to send those talks my way to do his content on servant leadership and the serve model and let me take those talks. Talk about empowering. I thought, oh my goodness.
That's incredible.
I'm presenting Mark's content, like calling me up into a whole new level of myself. And he'd say, make sure you get that recorded because we're going to critique it when it's done. And we'd both watch it independently and we'd come back together and say what was strong and what was weak. And let's tweak it and then do it again and then do it again and then do it again. And then he started saying, will you come to my talks and critique me? What? I'm like, whoa. I have to critique him, but he put himself in this student position and allowed me the gift of, is there anything I could see he could improve? And he really wanted me to give him feedback and he really listened. So he generously gave of his time, of his gift, and he called me to be able to step up. He saw what could be in me and lifted me up. So the thing that I learned powerfully from him that has etched my life forever and has changed how I pass on opportunities and how I say yes for opportunities to mentor and pour into people is his gift of giving generously of his time.
And what a neat thing that all of these deposits that were made in you, You know, we say this all the time. God never wastes our time. He never wastes our experiences. All of these deposits that were made in you are deposits. They were seeds that are growing in you that are now you're being able to fulfill that for a young Elizabeth, a younger leader who's coming behind you, even somebody listening in today. It's such a neat thing because these people, man, these are people that are our world will remember their deposits that they made on a massive scale. One of the other ones you got to be around that many know of, but they never knew was Truett Cathy. You got to be with the founder of Chick-fil-A, the humble founder of Chick-fil-A. What was a deposit that Truett made in your life that shaped who Elizabeth is today?
Gosh, he had so many powerful quotes and, the big three choices in life, master, mate, and mission. The whole, how do you win? What's important now? We're not in the chicken business. We're in the people business. I mean, he had an incredible way of pushing everybody toward what truly mattered. He was a very tenacious businessman, and he was extremely benevolent and generous and kind. He was both of those, which is such a beautiful, sometimes it can be a dichotomy, but when they're together, it just makes someone so unique. I really learned the most as because of my husband, John, his role with Truett. He was his assistant for 7 years. And so we lived next door to Truett and Jeanette for the first 5 years of our marriage. And the thing that really stood out to me the most was on a consistent basis, Truett would say, hey, let's go get some milkshakes. And he would take them to the widows of his friends. He knew what really mattered. He showed up for people in the moments that mattered. And he wasn't so busy with all the things of life that he missed the people. And that really stood out to me. He brought flowers to his wife all the time, which is so sweet. So John learned that.
Check.
Go to Publix, and Truett would say, why don't you get Elizabeth some flowers too? I'm like, this is amazing. But he knew what mattered the most. And Dan, his son, has been saying a lot recently, a good shepherd smells like his sheep. And Truett and Dan both really live that out. They shepherd people. They're not distant from the sheep and the details and the mess of life. They are right there shepherding people along. And so while he had incredible, really life-changing sayings that help you clearly move forward, what really stood out to me is what he did that nobody else saw, what he did that people would never know or applaud because it's who he was. He deeply cared for people.
And now you get to work with Dan every day.
Yeah.
You left Chick-fil-A and you have gone to the Trilith Foundation.
Yes.
And your new role in Trilith, overseeing the foundation end of the Trilith process. What have you learned from Dan Cathy? Getting to see him wearing his trainee badge at Chick-fil-A to leading now such a great organization at Trilith. What's been a deposit Dan's made in your life?
I actually have a OneNote file of lessons I'm learning from Dan.
Wow.
And I just continually add to them because they're frequent. I'd say recently, I'll say two. One is a good shepherd smells like a sheep. And that's really been sticking with me a lot. Don't get too busy for what really matters. The second is, and I can tell you how this just showed up recently. I mean, just yesterday, he went to go see one of the gentlemen that works, not for Trilith, but in the ecosystem of Trilith, who's in the hospital. And Dan's often the first one that's going to check in on people. And I think it's easy to be too busy for that stuff, and you feel good about sending a text. But when you show up for people in those moments, it's so powerful. So I'm constantly challenged, like, Elizabeth, don't get too busy for the stuff that matters. The other one that's really good is excellence is found in the details. So the more excellent you want to become, the deeper you're digging into the details of a system, of a process, of the organizational structure. The deeper you dig into the details. And here's a fun story. Months ago, I had gotten to Trilith pretty early. The streets were pretty quiet. There were some gentlemen who were sweeping the cobblestone streets because cobblestone, you put this gravel in between and it creates the the dynamic for being able to walk on it and drive on it. So they're sweeping the streets, and I'm walking down towards our breakfast spot there, Thumbs Up Diner, to meet someone for breakfast. And I hear, Elizabeth, Elizabeth. And I look over and it's Dan, and he's with these gentlemen who are sweeping the streets. And he said, come here, come here. And so I come over and he said, I want to show you how to sweep this gravel. I'm probably saying the wrong thing. It's not quite gravel, but tiny stones in between these cobblestones. He said to get it just right. And I thought, Dan knows how.
Yes.
The fact that he even knows, and he's not just like, get it right. Someone else needs to deal with that. He's taken the time to learn it. He knows it. And he's able to teach it. And he was there with these gentlemen helping them get it just right. Excellence is found in the smallest of details. And the deeper we dive in the details, the more excellent that we're going to become.
That's so good. And the more that comes on your plate, the harder that is.
Yes.
Because you want to fly over. And then when you begin to fly over, you're not who you were when you arrived at this new position, right?
Yes.
It's so hard to do. So what are you doing as your abilities begin? Because you carry an interesting thing, Elizabeth. You are the CEO of the True Life Foundation. You are a speaker. You're an author. You own a company. You're an entrepreneur, and you've started a company, and you're a mom. How do you live in those details while still being able to spread your wings so broad?
I think it goes back to that question of what's important. And so for me, my 80-year-old self, I'm going to be known by the people who are in my family and my friends the most. So how can I make sure that I'm protecting those moments? And you remember that analogy? I don't know who started it and who to give credit to, but the jar with the tiny rocks and the big rocks. And if you put the tiny rocks in and then you add the big rocks, nothing fits, or not everything fits. But if you put the big rocks in and then you pour the smaller rocks, they fit into the nooks and crannies. I think in every stage of life, it's a matter of looking, what are those big rocks and what do they need from me? So in this season, not all hours are created equal for me. 4 o'clock until about 8 o'clock has a different level of value for my family. That's probably not always going to be true. You can tell me, but I imagine when kids are in high school, they're probably off doing other things and they have cars. And when they get into college, it's probably going to look a whole lot different. But right now, after school, playing Foursquare together, eating dinner around the table together, holds a sacred value. And so that's a big rock for me. I have to put that piece in first. And then looking at each stage as they come and going, how do I need to adjust and shift? And I'll never forget, I was leaving Chick-fil-A one day and I was bawling, crying, and I called one of my mentors and I said, I'm screwing up my family. I shouldn't be working. And she calmed me down, let me get all my feelings out. And she said, honey, your system just broke. And I said, what?
Ooh, buddy.
And she said, your system just broke. She said, last week, did it work? Like last week, did you feel this way? No, I felt alive. I felt like everyone was good. I felt like I was making great choices. But no, she said, no, your system just broke. And the kids were little. And that's what was happening was, I'm taking them to the children's center at Chick-fil-A and they're breaking down crying. And so I'm thinking mom guilt. Oh my gosh, I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. She's like, no. You need to look at your system and you need to change it. And when kids are little, your systems are going to change really fast. And it's going to be overnight. And you're going to wake up and go, oh no, what worked yesterday doesn't work today. And you need to pull up, okay, I need to change my system. I think as much as it happens in family, it happens in work. You get a promotion. Right. The work is different. Someone on the team has to leave and you're taking on responsibility for them in the interim. Like you got to change your system. What got you here won't get you there. There's a great book on that whole piece. And so I think that that's been a really important for me to know what are the big rocks? How do I prioritize those? And then have the grace for myself and for those around me to go, okay, we might need a new system. We might need a new process. We might need to look at this differently and not just throw out the bathwater and the baby altogether, but be able to go, okay, what is it that's broken and what needs to change?
That's such sage advice, isn't it? I mean, that's advice from somebody that gave that to you that you may not be who you are today, if you hadn't have gotten that advice.
Absolutely.
If you had gone, because this goes right where I want to go and end our call today, you have accomplished a lot and carry a lot of weight. You may not have carried if somebody had given you other advice of, that's right, Elizabeth, you are broken. You do need to go home. And not that home's bad. It is, everybody's wired differently, right? And your living and your wiring, you have a keynote that you do called Making the Daunting Doable. I know so many people that sit on this side of a great idea, a great new endeavor, a sleepwear company, a new opportunity, and they feel like an imposter. And they go, I could never do that. What is advice that you would give to somebody about making the daunting doable? And how do you apply that advice?
So I feel like I had this whole blog for a season about, I called it Bite an Elephant, and that there's dreamers and there's doers. And often we fall into one of the categories where we either struggle with dreaming the bigger dreams, or we struggle with like actually taking action and doing it. And often we need both. Like we need to dream big and act on it every day. And so I think there's both parts. There's the part of imposter, like, is the table big enough? Is the table big enough for me to write a book on purpose? Like Simon Sinek wrote Start With Why. Why would I need to write a book on purpose? Who am I? But when you start to look at the seats at the table, so many of the books on purpose are about why a purpose matters. But is there a book that helps guide you to writing your purpose? And so, wow, okay, there is a seat at the table. And pajamas, there's so many pajama companies out there. Why me? Why would I do this? Well, I'm finding this gap between comfort, modesty, and cuteness. So I guess let's just try it. Let's go for it. So I think it's being able to assess, is the table big enough? Is there a seat at the table? And then going for it and doing the next step. There's a podcast, what is it? The Next Right Thing. I think I used to listen to that a few years ago all the time. But it's like, what is that next step? And it doesn't need to be starting a pajama company tomorrow. It's calling that friend who's in the industry and saying, am I crazy? Is this a good idea? I think we need to be able to walk into the unknown, both with wisdom and courage.
That's good.
Just be blind of like, nobody's ever done a pajama company before. Well, that's just ignorant. Yes, they do. But like wisdom, is this a crazy idea? Is there validity in this? Do you think this makes sense? And having those advisors around us that can speak truth to us, but then having courage, go for it. What is it you're chasing after and do the next step? I remember 7 years ago, I wanted to have a better morning routine. I wanted to exercise in the mornings. I wanted to do my normal exercise routine in the morning, but that was too much. That was daunting to me. But 10 minutes worked. So I would wake up 10 minutes earlier than I normally would, and I would do 10 minutes of exercise. Well, 10 minutes has turned to an hour and a half.
Wow.
Now I have my quiet time. I do my workout. I'm baking sourdough bread. Like, what in the world am I doing? And I'm having 30 minutes of coffee time with John. Like, it's the most sacred part of my day now, but it didn't go straight to that.
That's right.
With 10 minutes. And so I think there's both. There's the wisdom of, should I do this? And then whatever it is, I read it the other day. No one ever tells you that bravery feels like fear. Have the courage to go for it. You are going to feel uncomfortable. You probably will be nervous. You don't know everything. Go. Like, now's the time. Try it. Your comfort zone is going to kill your dreams way faster than your fear ever will. Like, push yourself, get a little nervous. That means you're in the ring. It means you're trying something. It means you're living a life. Our 80-year-old selves are going to have stories to tell. No one ever said, like, tell me about your comfort zone when you were in your 40s. No, they say, tell me about, like, when you were afraid in your 40s. Yes. And you did it anyway. And so failure is a means of learning. My dad always said, you just got your master's degree in blank. Whatever it is you do and it doesn't work. I mean, I've started businesses and closed businesses. Times come where you're like, the season has ended. This isn't working. I don't have capacity for this. that's okay. That's not failure. You had 3 years, 5 years, 20 years of whatever it is, and you have all the lessons that you can pour into the next generation coming up. So when they're bawling and crying down the road, not only do you get to add Elaine's advice of, honey, your system just broke, you also get to add all the stories from your life of, hey, let me help put this in perspective for you. You're going to be okay.
That's so good. And I can see why companies bring you in, because they have so many employees that may live in that. And to hear somebody put words to it is so powerful. And you have life example. You're not using it as a history lesson. You're living it right now. You are having to spread your wings and try new things and do things you've never done before. You've never led a foundation. You've never tried to figure out all the intricacies of that and leading a company. So final question. I could talk to you all day. You fascinate me. But final question of the day. One day, somebody's going to be on a podcast and they're going to say, you rubbed shoulders with Elizabeth Dixon. You were around her during her years where she was, man, just getting it done. What was your biggest takeaway from Elizabeth's life? What was the deposit she left in you? What would you like for somebody to say?
Man, I would want someone to say that she lived out her faith authentically in a way that invited me to be the very best version of myself. That she saw in me what I didn't see in myself. And she was a safe guide that inspired me to be bold, to be courageous, and to do it out of a purpose that was way bigger than myself.
Rich. Elizabeth is so sharp. You see when you hear her talk and when you experience just being around Elizabeth, that energy, the effortless energy that she brings to the table, and just the sharpness of everything she does and says is just on point. And man, I've met Elizabeth one time. We've gotten to be on here a couple of times, but I mean, you see what a great leader like Dan Cathy would see in her. And man, she is out there getting it done and making the daunting doable. And I've told her, I said, listen, anytime you've got new stuff coming out, we'll always have you back, because she represents what this podcast is all about. And that's a leader that's leading with their faith out in front. Faith's not something they keep in the closet. Faith isn't something they go to church on Sundays, but it infects and is contagious in everything that they do. Thank you, Elizabeth Dixon, for being with me again and for making us all better. Well, I hope this podcast adds value to you. I talked to so many of you out and about, ran into a great leader this morning who said, man, this episode, and he named the episode, was exactly what I needed. And that's what this podcast is here for. It's to encourage you. It's to inspire you. It's to help you. Some episodes are just rich content. Other episodes are inspirational. Our next episode is an inspirational episode. We sit down with former WNBA Hall of Famer Maya Irons. Maya Moore Irons is how you may remember her. Gold medal in multiple NCAA championships, UNBA championships, may be one of the best basketball players of all time, men or women. Maya is special. And you not only get to hear from Maya, you get to hear from her husband, Jonathan, on this episode and hear their story. It is incredible. There's been a TV documentary made about it, an ESPN documentary made about it. And I'm going to tell you something. When you hear it, you're going to know why. So don't miss episode 237, because it's going to be a good one. A really good one. So if you enjoy this, please share it with a friend. It does help other people find their way to us. Second, leave a rating and review. Always helps us. But I just want to tell you, man, it means the world that you took time to join in, to listen in, to give me a little bit of your drive time. It means the world to me. So go today. Love God, love people, and live sent. And let's make a difference in the space and the place that He's put us.
Thank you for listening to the Linch with a Leader podcast with your host, Mike Lynch. If you enjoyed this episode, you can help more people hear it by subscribing and leaving a review wherever you may be listening. For full episode notes and more spiritual leadership resources, visit MikeLynch.com.